They called it a routine policy update. HR said it was about alignment, that word corporations use when they're about to move the goalposts and smile while doing it. The email dropped into my inbox at 7:46 a.m. Same minute every company-wide mandate seems to arrive, like they scheduled a seat between morning coffee and denial. Subject: Revised Employment Agreement. Action required by Friday. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I opened the attachment. Clause 12.4 jumped out at me like a snake. All intellectual property developed by the employee during the course of employment, including work performed off-site or outside regular business hours, shall remain the sole property of Altinex Systems. That one line stopped me cold. I wasn't new to corporate trickery. I'd seen managers dress theft as collaboration and watched entire departments get credit stripped under the banner of team success. But this was different. This wasn't flattery or exploitation. This was ownership of me. I read it twice more just to be sure. They weren't only claiming the code I wrote on company time. They wanted everything. My freelance algorithms, my personal research notes, even the project I'd been quietly building at home, Vireo. The name still gave me chills. An AI optimization engine that could predict and rebalance cloud loads in real time, my personal obsession for 2 years. I'd built it on my own hardware, paid for every license, and pushed every commit at hours the company servers were asleep. It was the one thing in my life not controlled by Altinex. And now, with one contract revision, they were trying to take it. I walked straight to HR. They smiled that soft, polished smile they learn in onboarding, the one that says, "We're pretending you have a choice." "Hey, Noah," said Dana, the HR lead. "Got your acknowledgement yet? The CEO wants everyone signed by end of day." I read the new clause, I said. "It's overreaching." "Overreaching?" she repeated, blinking like it was a new word. "You're claiming ownership of anything I build on my own time." Dana's smile didn't waver. "It's standard, Noah, just legal housekeeping. You're one of our top engineers. This won't even affect you." "That's the problem," I said. "It shouldn't affect anyone." Her eyes flicked to her monitor, reading an invisible script. "If you're concerned, you can raise it with leadership." I did. Eleanor Grant, CEO. The kind of woman who ran meetings like military drills and never touched a keyboard, yet talked about innovation as if it were a perfume she'd invented. She listened with perfect calm as I laid out my concern. When I finished, she smiled. Wide, deliberate, dangerous. "Noah, you're talented. But let's be clear. When you work for Altinex, everything you create is part of Altinex. That's how innovation scales. That's how we scale." I leaned forward. "Even if it's built on my own computer, on my own time?" She didn't blink. "We don't believe in drawing lines between inspiration and execution. If our environment inspires you, it belongs to us." That was the moment I realized it wasn't about law. It was about power. I left her office without shaking her hand. By the time I sat back at my desk, the whispers had already started. Someone from legal had flagged my name. Someone else mentioned policy resistance. In a company like Altinex, that's a death sentence with benefits. That night, I opened my laptop at home, not the company machine, mine. Vireo's interface glowed softly in the dark, a pulse of quiet rebellion. I stared at the lines of code like they were a mirror. If Altinex wanted ownership, they'd have to earn it the hard way, in court. I clicked open a new folder on my encrypted drive and labeled it Vireo, Proof of Independence. Then I began documenting everything: time, date, energy consumption, IP address. Every keystroke another brick in a legal fortress they'd never see coming. They wanted my mind. They could have my fight instead. Vireo wasn't supposed to be a movement. It was supposed to be my quiet rebellion, a neat, stubborn proof that I could still make something pure when the office tried to own my breath. But code has its own gravity. You set it loose, and it finds the people who've been waiting for it. It started small, a single GitHub star, then 5, then a thread on a niche sysadmin forum where someone wrote, "Whoever Noah Reyes is, he understands load asymmetry better than half the vendors." I pretended not to notice and kept polishing. I refactored the inference layer, added a sandbox demo, and wrote documentation like it was a love letter to every engineer who had ever been told to do more with less. I pushed at 1:37 a.m., local timestamp to my apartment's IP. The next morning, my inbox looked like I'd accidentally subscribed to Possibility. A university researcher wanted to test Vireo against their aging scheduler. A fintech CTO asked if I offered consulting. 2 accelerators sent copy-paste invites that sounded like energy drinks in email form. Then a journalist DM'd me on Twitter. "Your repo is doing numbers. Care to talk?" I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't hiding, I was calibrating. By midweek, someone submitted Vireo to an open-source newsletter. Download counts climbed. Stars kept blinking on like city lights at dusk. I told myself to breathe, to be boring, to keep the circle small until the foundation was unshakable. But Altinex taught me one lesson too well. Attention is a siren and a subpoena at the same time. At lunch, I ate alone in the shadow of the server room, scrolling through issues and pull requests on my phone. A junior dev slid into the chair across from me and whispered, "Dude, Vireo is trending on the ops subreddit." He said it like contraband. Then he asked too casually, "You built that on your own, right?" I smiled in a way that meant nothing and everything. Always have. 2 hours later, I caught the first tremor. My VPN token hiccuped. A permission pop-up I'd never seen before requested re-authentication. Harmless if you weren't me. I watched the timestamp, the source, the way the alert tried to look accidental. It reeked of coordinated curiosity. I typed the code, waited, then opened a blank notes file and wrote, "Minor access anomaly, 2:14 p.m. Not paranoia. History." That night, I upgraded Vireo's telemetry module and posted a benchmark chart comparing cloud costs under high volatility. It was honest and brutal. The chart hit Hacker News around midnight. By morning, the thread was a small riot of praise, skepticism, and the purest compliment of all, demanding proof. I replied with logs, not adjectives. The top comment became a neon sign. "If this is real, vendors are in trouble." Eleanor had eyes everywhere. She didn't need to read code to smell a shift in power. The summons arrived not as an invitation, but as gravity. Strategy sync. Mandatory. She kept the room cold enough to store regret. When I walked in, product, legal, and a thin layer of executives lined the glass like a human border. No one asked me to sit. She didn't mention Vireo by name. Of course she didn't. "We're refreshing our IP positioning," she announced, clicking to a slide that might as well have been a velvet thread. "Innovation flows through Altinex. We don't build here and sell there. We build here, and we scale." Her eyes flicked to me for a fraction of a beat. It was enough. After the meeting, 2 things happened almost at once. A recruiter from a rival messaged me with a number big enough to bend a spine, and IT sent a friendly reminder about acceptable use with a bullet that hadn't existed yesterday. Employees are discouraged from maintaining public repositories related to their expertise during employment. Discouraged, not prohibited. The kind of word you use before you flip the switch. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the blinds drawn, Vireo open on one screen and a blank email on the other. I wrote to a lawyer whose blog I'd bookmarked months ago, someone who lived in the borderlands between labor law and IP. The subject line was simple: time, place, manner. I described Vireo, the clause, the attention. I attached nothing sensitive. I asked 3 questions that turned out to be 1. How do I protect what's mine without starting a war I can't win? Her auto-reply was instant and human. Received. I'll review and respond within 24 hours. I exhaled. Half relief, half ignition. Then I opened my encrypted folder and added new entries to the timeline. Commit IDs, power usage spikes from my home rig, purchase receipts for the GPU I'd bought on a maxed-out card a lifetime ago. I wasn't waiting for Altinex to decide who I was. I was building the museum before they claimed the art. Near midnight, I pushed another update and closed the lid. The room hummed with the residue of voltage and nerve. I lay awake and thought about lines. How corporations hate them. How courts love them. How survival is in the drawing. In the morning, my lawyer's reply arrived. Concise, surgical, necessary. Document, separate, avoid their network. Do not sign anything new. If they escalate, you do not negotiate. You verify. I smiled into my coffee. The spark wasn't an accident. It was a signal, and somewhere inside Altinex, someone had just noticed the smoke. The email subject line said it all. System Integrity Review, immediate. In corporate language, that's code for "we're coming for you." When I arrived that morning, my badge still worked, but the air didn't. 3 men in matching navy blazers were waiting by my desk. IT security, led by a compliance officer I'd never met before. Behind them, my manager, Nate, hovered with the smile of someone pretending this wasn't a setup. Routine audit, the lead said. All engineering assets are being checked for cross-environment usage. Translation? We think you built something without us. They asked me to step aside while they cloned my company laptop. The whole thing took 20 minutes, long enough for the entire floor to notice. When I came back, the chatter had stopped. Conversations pivoted mid-sentence. Colleagues wouldn't meet my eyes. Altinex had a special talent for turning curiosity into isolation. I walked straight to the server logs. My access had been downgraded. Half my repositories were now restricted. And my inbox, filled with polite HR follow-ups, had a new message waiting. From legal@altinexsystems.com, subject, clarification of outside intellectual activity. Noah, it has come to our attention that you may be engaged in external development activities overlapping with your assigned domain. Please provide project names, contributors, and environments used. Failure to comply may be treated as breach of contract. Legal Affairs, Altinex Systems. I read it twice, then leaned back, letting the absurdities settle in. They weren't even subtle. They were fishing. I didn't reply. Not yet. I called Marina Vega instead, the IP lawyer I'd contacted after the Vireo launch. She answered on the first ring. They moved fast, she said. Tell me everything. I told her about the audit, the legal email, the sudden loss of access. She listened without interrupting, except for the occasional pen click. They want you to panic, she said finally. They're hoping you'll admit something they can weaponize. Don't. Everything you've built was outside their network? Completely, I said. Local hardware, personal account, independent software licenses. Good. Then breathe. But breathing was a luxury. By lunch, the rumor mill had shifted gears. Someone whispered that I'd leaked proprietary code. Another said I was developing a competing product. The paranoia spread faster than truth ever could. At 3 p.m., HR summoned me. Marissa from HR sat across the table with legal's representative, a man whose tie looked like it had been chosen to distract from his eyes. They started politely. We just need clarity. Transparency helps everyone. This can all be resolved quickly. Then came the question they really cared about. Is it true you've developed software independently that could be considered adjacent to Altinex's technology stack? I looked them both in the eye. Define adjacent. They didn't like that answer. The legal rep cleared his throat. You understand that any work related to predictive modeling, resource optimization, or artificial intelligence falls under Altinex's strategic scope. I smiled. That's broad enough to cover half the internet. You planning to sue Google, too? That earned me a glare. They handed me a document labeled Statement of Cooperation, basically a written confession dressed up as diplomacy. Signing it would have allowed them to access my personal devices for verification. Marina's voice echoed in my head. Do not sign anything new. I slid the paper back across the table. If you think there's overlap, prove it. For the first time, Marissa's smile cracked. Noah, refusing to cooperate will make this worse. No, I said calmly. It'll make it fair. When I returned to my desk, my account was logged out. Security access revoked. I was now a ghost in my own office. I packed quietly. My notebook, a USB charger, the mug that said code and coffee. The compliance team watched, pretending it was procedure, but I could feel it. They thought this was the end of my story. It wasn't. That night, I opened my home terminal. Vireo loaded smoothly, humming like a secret that refused to die. I ran fresh logs, cross-referencing every commit with independent timestamps, compiling digital proof of ownership, the kind of evidence that speaks louder than any lawyer. At 11:24 p.m., I hit send on one email. To Marina Vega. Subject, audit update. They're escalating. I'm ready. Let's prepare the file. I stared at the monitor's glow until it blurred into light. They wanted to make me the villain of a story they didn't understand. That was fine, because when this audit ended, they'd learn the real definition of ownership. The next morning, the world inside Altinex tilted on its axis. The official company newsletter, normally a stream of hollow motivational quotes and photos of birthday cupcakes, carried a new banner headline. Integrity and Innovation, Protecting What We Build Together. The subtext was poison wrapped in corporate velvet. The article referenced recent instances of external development conflicting with company ethics, and violations of trust within key technical divisions. No names, of course. It didn't need them. The hallway whispers filled in the blanks. By noon, I wasn't a person anymore. I was a rumor with a badge that no longer worked. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I answered, expecting HR. Instead, it was Eleanor Grant. Her voice was calm, precise, engineered for dominance. Noah, I'm told you're making things complicated. I'm protecting my work, I said. Your work, she repeated, the words dipped in irony. You're welcome to protect it once legal confirms it isn't ours. I could almost hear her smile through the line. You have talent, she continued, but talent without loyalty is chaos. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Bring us the source files and we can make this collaborative. I laughed softly. You don't want collaboration. You want ownership. Ownership, she said, is how progress stays sustainable. And then she hung up. That was her move. Drop the threat. Let it echo. By the afternoon, my Slack access was revoked, my desk cleaned out by facilities, and an internal memo circulated announcing my sabbatical pending compliance review. Sabbatical. The kind of word people use when they don't have the stomach to say exile. But here's the thing about silence. It's a perfect place to plan. I set up my workstation at home, 3 monitors glowing in the dark like an orchestra waiting for its cue. My apartment smelled like coffee and tension. On one screen, Vireo hummed. The codebase pristine, documented, clean. On the second, I opened the digital archive Marina had helped me build. Power bills showing late-night coding sessions at my address. Screenshots of GitHub commits tagged with independent timestamps. Proof of personal software licenses purchased with my own card. An off-site server log showing 0 connection to Altinex's VPN. Every byte was evidence. Every file a shield. But I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was drawing a map for retaliation. At 9 p.m., Marina called. "They're preparing to file," she said, "claiming breach of intellectual property and violation of your employment contract. But I've reviewed the clause. It's unenforceable if we prove independent development." "They're counting on intimidation," I said. "Then give them something to fear," she replied. That night, I uploaded Vireo's documentation to a private repository under my own registered LLC. One notarized submission later, the intellectual property was legally protected, not by company policy, but by law. Eleanor might have built Altinex like a fortress, but she'd forgotten the oldest truth in tech. Fortresses don't collapse from the outside. They rot from within. The next morning, she made her grand move. A mandatory all-hands meeting. The entire company logged in, over 400 faces glowing in rows of digital compliance. I joined silently, under a generic link someone had forwarded me. Eleanor appeared on screen, poised as ever. "Altinex has always been a home for innovators," she said. "But innovation without alignment becomes a liability. One of our former engineers," she paused, letting the phrasing slice, "chose to prioritize personal gain over collective vision." The chat exploded. People guessed. Everyone knew. I felt a calm so deep it almost scared me. Because while Eleanor performed her morality play, I was performing something else. A full mirror upload of her own hypocrisy. Marina and I had already drafted the counterclaim. When she finished, I opened my email and pressed send. 2. Horizon Tech Media. Subject: Statement regarding Altinex systems. Attached: Official documentation proving ownership of Vireo, independent development logs, and ongoing legal intimidation from Altinex systems. 5 minutes later, it was public. The same platforms that had praised Vireo now tore into Altinex. Company claims employees' open-source innovation as its own. Corporate overreach backfires. Developer lawyered up before signing. By evening, Altinex's PR department had issued a half-hearted denial. By midnight, their stock had dipped 5%. In less than 12 hours, Eleanor's fortress had a crack wide enough for daylight. I sat back in my chair, watching the news feeds update in real time. They thought they were playing chess, but they'd forgotten. I was the one who built the board, and I'd just made my opening move. It happened on a Friday, because corporate cruelty always prefers the quiet before a weekend. The calendar invite came through at 7:03 a.m. sharp. Subject: Final compliance review. Attendance mandatory. No body text. No warmth. Just the digital equivalent of a firing squad lining up its rifles. I walked into the conference room at 9 on the dot. HR was there, Marissa again, smiling like she'd practiced in a mirror. Beside her sat legal, the same man with the pastel tie. And at the head of the table, as if presiding over a ceremony she'd written herself, was Eleanor Grant. She didn't waste time. "Noah," she began, "we've concluded our investigation. Your conduct represents a clear breach of contract and a violation of our intellectual property policy." I didn't flinch. You mean the clause that claims ownership of my personal work? The one you slipped into an email disguised as a policy update? Her eyes hardened, just enough to betray satisfaction. That clause is standard across multiple firms in our sector. Then maybe your whole sector needs a lawyer, I said. Marissa stepped in, her voice syrup-sweet. We really don't want this to get adversarial. If you'll just sign the termination agreement, we can ensure a smooth exit. She slid a stack of papers toward me. My name at the top, legal jargon beneath it. The final page carried the kicker, a non-compete clause so broad it could have exiled me from the entire tech industry for 2 years. I read every word, slowly, deliberately. Then I leaned back, folded my hands, and said, no. The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Eleanor tilted her head slightly, studying me the way a cat studies a bird. You're not in a position to negotiate. I smiled, small, deliberate, surgical. Then neither are you. Her brows knit for the first time. Excuse me? Because as of 10 minutes ago, I said, Altinex is trending on every tech forum for claiming ownership of open-source software. You've got a public relations crisis brewing. I'm guessing you haven't checked your notifications yet. The legal rep's phone buzzed right on cue, his face blanched. Marissa glanced at him, confused. Eleanor didn't move, but I saw her pulse flicker at her jawline. I stood. Let me make this simple, I said. You can fire me. You can blacklist me. But you don't get to own me. Vireo was built off your clock, off your servers, off your dime, and I have the receipts. Eleanor spoke finally, calm but sharp. You're making a mistake. I nodded. That's what every tyrant says before discovery begins. I walked out before they could find another word. By the time I reached the lobby, my access badge blinked red. Security escorted me out, though I didn't need their help to leave something that small behind. Outside, the air was cold and electric. Freedom always feels colder than you expect. I sat in my car and opened my laptop. Marina had already sent a message. Termination confirmed. They overplayed. We file Monday. I typed back. Make it public. She replied with a single emoji. Scales of justice. That weekend I didn't code. I didn't post. I just watched. The news cycle spun faster than even I anticipated. Altinex accused of retaliation against developer. Independent audit suggests questionable IP practices. By Sunday night, investors were demanding answers. A small army of tech lawyers weighed in on social media, calling the company's policy legally indefensible. And somewhere in her glass office, I knew Eleanor was pacing. Every word she'd ever weaponized now turned against her. On Monday morning, we filed the lawsuit. Reyes versus Altinex Systems, wrongful termination, breach of employee rights, and attempted misappropriation of independent intellectual property. Within an hour, journalists were calling. I didn't give them quotes. I didn't need to. The story was already writing itself. The fired engineer versus the billion-dollar CEO. David and Goliath, rewritten in code. That night, I reopened Vireo. For the first time in weeks, I didn't look at it like a defense mechanism. I looked at it like what it really was. Freedom in syntax form. Altinex had taken everything they could reach. My job, my reputation, my place in their machine. But what they didn't realize was that I'd already built something bigger than their entire empire. They thought firing me was the end of the story. It was the beginning of the trial. The first time I saw the words Reyes v. Altinex Systems, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it finally looked real. For weeks I'd been running on instinct, defend, document, survive. Seeing it typed in the formal precision of a court filing felt like breathing for the first time in months. Marina, my lawyer, was a calm storm in human form. Collected, surgical, and frighteningly efficient. Her office was minimal. A single long desk, 2 monitors, and a wall of legal texts color-coded by confidence. "They're counting on intimidation," she said, scrolling through the digital case file. "They think you'll settle once they throw their resources at you." I leaned back in my chair. "Then they haven't met my receipts." She smiled faintly. "We'll make them read every single one." The first strike came fast. Altinex filed a 68-page counterclaim alleging breach of contract, violation of trade secret laws, and theft of proprietary algorithms. Marina read it once, then slid it across the table to me. "They're bluffing," she said. "Half of this is speculation. The other half is fear." She was right. Their claim hinged on one thing: that I had used company resources to develop Vireo. But they underestimated how meticulous desperation can make a man. Every timestamp, every power bill, every log line I'd archived painted a clear picture. Vireo had been built entirely outside Altinex's ecosystem. By the time we filed our response, Marina had turned my documentation into a weapon. Exhibit A: GitHub commit logs with geolocation data proving off-site work. Exhibit B: email correspondence with my landlord confirming electrical usage. Exhibit C: receipts for personal software licenses predating the Altinex policy update. Exhibit D: a notarized statement confirming my development environment was never connected to the company's VPN. Each piece was a nail in the coffin they'd built for themselves. When Eleanor finally took the stand for the preliminary hearing, she still looked like a CEO. Tailored suit, measured poise. But the edge was gone. The arrogance had been replaced with something tighter, more brittle. Marina didn't waste a second. "Ms. Grant, did you personally approve the policy amendment that redefined employee intellectual property ownership?" Eleanor blinked. "All contractual updates pass through legal review." "So you're saying you didn't?" A pause. "I approved the concept. Without legal validation." Her jaw flexed. It was standard practice. Marina leaned forward slightly, voice sharp as glass. "Standard practice that violates state labor law?" Eleanor shifted in her chair. Somewhere in the back row, one of her attorneys coughed. Marina continued, unrelenting. "Can you show any record that Mr. Reyes used company servers to develop the software in question?" Eleanor hesitated. "The forensic team believes—" "We're not asking what they believe," Marina interrupted smoothly. "We're asking what you can prove." The silence that followed was surgical. After the hearing, Altinex's lawyers tried to settle quietly. They offered me money, more than I'd ever made in a year at the company. Marina asked if I wanted to hear the number. I didn't. "They're trying to buy silence," I said. She nodded. "It's what they do when they know they're losing." "Then we don't settle." For the next 2 weeks, depositions piled up like falling dominoes. One engineer testified that the policy update had been rushed and confusing. Another revealed that internal memos referred to it as Project Lockbox, an initiative to retain all IP from high-output employees. When the press caught that phrase, it went viral. Project Lockbox, how a billion-dollar company tried to steal its employees' ideas. By the 3rd week, Altinex's public image was bleeding faster than its legal credibility. Former staffers began sharing stories, deleted projects, silenced developers, NDAs that blurred the line between loyalty and servitude. The company had built a culture of fear, and now that fear was feeding me. The trial date was set for spring, but before it could even begin, the board of directors issued a statement. Altinex Systems acknowledges certain internal missteps in policy execution. Effective immediately, Eleanor Grant will be stepping down as CEO. When Marina read it aloud, I just stared at the screen. I thought she'd drag this out, I said quietly. She knows Discovery would have finished her, Marina replied. She finished herself, I said. That evening, I walked downtown past the Altinex building. The lobby lights still burned, but the nameplate out front had been polished clean, like they were trying to erase fingerprints from a weapon. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should have taken the deal. E. I stared at it for a long moment before typing back, you should have read the law. Then I deleted her message and looked up at the skyline. The city hummed with energy, like something vast and unstoppable was waking up. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being small. I wasn't fighting to keep what was mine anymore. I was proving that integrity, when documented, could be lethal, and I wasn't done yet. Courthouses never feel like justice. They feel like hospitals, bright, antiseptic, and faintly exhausted. I sat at counsel table with Marina, palms flat on cool wood, watching the opposing side array itself like a showroom of expensive certainty. Eleanor didn't look at me as she took her seat. She stared at the judge's bench like it was a mirror that might lie for her one last time. Calling Reyes versus Altinex Systems, the clerk said, voice echoing off marble. People shifted. Pens clicked. Truth, I've learned, always arrives in small sounds before it thunders. Marina rose first. She didn't posture, she didn't pace. She laid out the skeleton of our case in plain language. Independent development on personal hardware, off-hours commits, receipts, server logs, notarized timelines. Then she paused, letting silence do the heavy lifting. This isn't a debate about loyalty, she said. It's a question of ownership. And ownership is proof. Altinex led with a senior partner whose cufflinks probably had their own NDAs. He called my work derivative, claimed inevitable overlap, and waved at a printout of industry buzzwords like it could summon relevance. When he finished, the judge adjusted her glasses and asked, Counselor, do you intend to show a single artifact tying Mr. Reyes's code to Altinex's systems? The partner promised exhibits that never came. Then came witnesses. First, Nate, my former manager, skin pale under fluorescent truth. Did Mr. Reyes ever push Vireo from an Altinex machine? Marina asked. No, he said, eyes dropping. We couldn't find any record. Because there is none, Marina said. Thank you. Second, Dana from HR. Marina projected the policy update email. The claws glared from the screen like a lit fuse. Ms. Patel, did you explain to employees that Altinex claimed ownership over anything they created off-site and off-hours? It was standard, she began. Standard where? Marina asked. Show this court a single jurisdiction that permits blanket claims on unrelated off-the-clock creations. Dana swallowed. I can't. Third, their forensic lead, who spoke in confident monotone until Marina asked him to read the IP addresses associated with my commits. Do any belong to Altinex? No. And the geolocation? Mr. Reyes's residence. Thank you. No further questions. By the time Eleanor took the stand, the room had shifted. Even the air felt heavier, like it understood consequence. Marina kept her voice gentle, which is how kindness can become a scalpel. Ms. Grant, who authorized Clause 12.4? I did, Eleanor said. At my direction. Against legal advice? Our counsel expressed reservations. Marina lifted a document. Plaintiff's Exhibit 42, internal memo, codename Project Lockbox, targeting high-output employees for post hoc IP capture. Your signature appears on page 2. Eleanor's jaw set. We protect what we build. Marina didn't look away. So do creators. Opposing counsel objected. Overruled. Then it was my turn. Sworn in, seated, microphone too close to my breath. Mr. Reyes, Marina said, why did you build Vireo? Because the problems I was hired to solve kept getting buried under politics, I said. I wanted a tool that served reality, not a roadmap. Did you ever use Altinex equipment? No. Altinex time? No. Altinex code? Never. She nodded, then asked the only question that mattered to me. What did you do when they tried to take it? I documented everything, I said, because power argues, proof doesn't. Opposing counsel tried to rattle me with hypotheticals. What if a conversation in a hallway inspired an algorithm? What if a whiteboard sketch resembled a concept? Marina objected once, then let me answer the rest. Inspiration isn't possession, I said. If it were, every book would belong to the library. A few people in the gallery smiled. Even the court reporter's keys sounded lighter. Closing arguments arrived like weather fronts. Their side thundered about team, risk, and strategic unity. Marina spoke of boundaries and law, the dignity of making something with your hands and mind, and not having it laundered into someone else's equity. She ended the way she began, quiet. You don't have to like Mr. Reyes, she said, glancing at the bench. You only have to see what the evidence says. He built this. They tried to take it. The judge recessed for an hour that felt like a year. I stood in the hallway staring at a watercolor of a tree that had been painted so carefully it almost breathed. Eleanor passed by with her lawyers in a tight halo. For a second, our eyes met. There was no hatred there, just calculation giving way to math. We filed back in. The judge read without theatrics. On the claim of misappropriation of intellectual property for the defendant, Mr. Reyes. On the counterclaim of wrongful termination and unlawful contractual overreach for the plaintiff, Mr. Reyes. Damages awarded for lost wages, attorney's fees, and injunctive relief enjoining Altinex from asserting ownership over Mr. Reyes's independent work. No gavel slam, no orchestra swell. Just words rearranging the shape of my life. Eleanor closed her eyes once, as if bracing for an impact that had already happened. I exhaled a breath I hadn't noticed I was hoarding. Marina scribbled a note, "We did it," and slid it to me like a victory no one needed to see to believe. Outside, the afternoon had turned gold, the city edges softened by late light. Reporters clustered near the steps. I didn't stop. I didn't pose. I walked past microphones and questions and down into the ordinary noise of traffic and footsteps. Courthouses may not feel like justice, but for once, leaving one did. The story broke before sunrise. By the time I opened my laptop, headlines had already flooded the feeds. Engineer wins landmark IP case against Altinex systems. Court rules companies can't claim side projects as corporate property. The Vireo verdict, a blueprint for employee rights in tech. Every tech blog, legal site, and startup newsletter had something to say. Some called me the engineer who drew the line. Others called me reckless. I didn't care. The noise meant people were finally paying attention to something more than stock prices and slogans about innovation. When I stepped outside, the city felt different, cleaner somehow. Maybe it was just me. I hadn't realized how heavy it was to walk under someone else's shadow until it was gone. By mid-morning, my inbox was chaos. Messages from journalists, lawyers, founders, recruiters offering salaries that made my old paycheck look like an apology. Former coworkers, some with genuine congratulations, others with cautious admiration. And buried between all that, an email from an address I hadn't seen in months. Subject: It's over. From Eleanor Grant. You won, Noah. I hope it was worth it. For what it's worth, you were the only one who ever built something real here. E. I read it twice, then archived it. No anger, no triumph, just closure. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be final. 3 weeks later, Marina and I met at a small cafe near the courthouse. The noise of life outside, the clatter of cups, snippets of laughter, felt almost surreal after the sterile silence of litigation. She ordered black coffee, same as always. Altinex wants to settle the damages quietly, she said. They're offering double what the court awarded if you agree to drop public claims. I smiled. They still think silence is for sale. They always do, she said. You're a free man, Noah. Legally, financially, everything. What's next? I looked out the window. Across the street, a billboard showed an ad for Altinex. Different logo, new tagline. Innovation, redefined. Funny, I said. They kept the word but lost its meaning. I'm not asking about them, she said. I'm asking about you. A week later, I registered Vireo Labs as an independent company. Small team, remote first. No suits, no clauses that smother creativity in the name of control. Our founding rule was simple. What you build, you own. When the first investor pitch deck came in, I deleted it. We weren't going to sell this time. We were going to grow it right. Within months, the tool I'd built in solitude became a movement. Engineers across the world contributed patches, extensions, new modules. Universities added it to open-source curricula. Companies used it to optimize their infrastructure, and every line of code carried the same signature: created freely. And sometimes, when people asked how it all started, I told them the truth, with a clause buried in an email, and the choice not to sign it. The first time I saw Eleanor again was almost a year later, at a global tech summit. She looked smaller, not diminished, just human. We crossed paths near the conference floor. She hesitated before speaking. Noah, she said softly, congratulations. The court changed everything. So did your clause, I said. For a heartbeat, we just stood there, two people bound by the same lesson, taught on opposite sides of ambition. I'm consulting now, she said finally, advising startups on ethical leadership. That's poetic, I said. She smiled faintly. Maybe too late for me, but not for them. I nodded. Maybe not. She walked away. No tension, no bitterness, just two paths diverging into something almost like redemption. That night I gave a keynote to a packed auditorium. The title, The Cost of Ownership. I talked about boundaries, law, and the quiet revolution of creators taking back their autonomy. I didn't preach revenge. I preached accountability. When it was over, I stood by the window of the hotel, watching the skyline flicker with light. Not the artificial kind that blinds, but the kind that signals movement, growth, creation. In the reflection, I saw the faint glow of my laptop on the table behind me. Vireo's interface pulsed gently. alive and evolving. I smiled, not at the victory, but at the quiet truth it carried. Some things aren't meant to be owned. They're meant to be built. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't fighting anyone. I was just building again.